Hello and welcome to This Is Austin. Do you think that Sony needs to expand the back catalog of the PS3?
I think they should buy Nintendo.
Look, I'm still reeling over. You told me that the acquisition between Microsoft and Activision was roughly the same market cap as Nintendo, and I can't stop thinking about that.
It is wild. But today we're talking about a slightly different thing that's actually a little bit more relevant to us non-billionaire gamers, which is the rumors are starting to heat up. The PS5 might be getting PS3 back compatibility. Maybe.
So we are basing this off of very small facts, but
you can see PS3 games on your PS5.
Correct, which you shouldn't be doing if backwards compatibility is not a thing. But they say it's a bug. Oh no, I accidentally coded in all these games and prices and download sizes, and we've kind of been talking about this for a long time, that really the thing that PlayStation is lacking right now is any type of back compatibility. That is the one thing that Xbox is absolutely dominating in this comparison of just bringing their back catalog. There are so many Xbox 360 games.
A Series S or Series X can basically play every well, with some exceptions, but generally speaking, almost every Xbox game that's ever been made, which is excellent.
Where there's the exceptions of games that Xbox can't play, it's almost like, well, there's some exceptions that the PlayStation can play.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about AAA titles that were available on PlayStation 3 that are not available on PS4 or PS5. These are exclusives. Almost the entire Metal Gear Solid collection, Little Big Planet, the 1 and 2 of those, Ratchet and Clank, the HD remasters, Splinter Cell remasters, it's Twisted Metal. These are big franchises that you cannot play on PlayStation 5 or even PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal.
It is, and I think there are a lot of questions here. One of the big ones was the PS4 famously never had any backwards compatibility because it was such a different architecture. Now, Microsoft kind of thought ahead a little bit. They were actually able to customize the chip on the Xbox One and all the subsequent chips to be able to have a little bit of extra spice to help with backwards compatibility. Now, on the Sony side, the PS3 was infamously difficult to develop for because it had a very complicated cell architecture with all the SPUs. It had this proprietary NVIDIA GPU. It was a weird device. Now, the PS3 was incredibly powerful for its day, but it took basically the entire console generation before developers were really able to get their hands around it. And because of that complexity, when it came time for the PS4 to come out, Sony was like, nah, no backwards compatibility whatsoever. And while, yes, we can play PS4 games on a PS5, that's very, very much closer. I think one thing to talk about here is the potential of the PS5 to actually emulate PS3 games, because the PS4 did not have the power for it. I completely believe that, no matter how much sort of Sony magic you put on it.
Right.
But I do believe the PS5 could run PS3 games, mostly because, well, you can do it on a PC. So there's an emulator called RPCS3. It is a very high compatibility PlayStation 3 emulator. Now, this is only a few years old, but it has gotten better very quickly. This is an incredibly complicated system to emulate. You've got that weird NVIDIA GPU that there's next to no documentation on. You have to emulate all these sort of weird SPU core things. As of right now, I'm looking at the site right now, out of 3,250 games available for the PS3, 63% of them are playable on PC, 0% of them don't work at all, which is an incredibly impressive feat considering that this is the open source community who's putting this together. The thing is, to run this, obviously you need a very powerful computer. Now, it can technically run on most systems, but if you want to get any decent level of compatibility, you're going to want at least 6 cores of a Zen 2 AMD architecture, aka the exact same CPU that's inside a PS5 and a Series X, and you also want an AMD Vulkan GPU that's 4000 series or newer, again, the exact same kind of GPU that you'll find inside a PS5. There's no reason for the PS5 not to technically be able to play PS3 games. Now, I am not going to sit here and tell you that that is a simple thing to enable. Obviously, the developers and the community behind RPCS3, it's such a hard name to say, they've spent years putting this together. I remember those first proof of concepts were incredibly basic, and people were just blown away that a simple 2D game would work.
Yeah, I remember it used to be something like 8 times the performance of the original system is what you needed to emulate it.
It's very, very difficult. But I think technically the PS5 can run PS3 games. The question is Sony going to do it? Because we've seen for months and months now rumors swirling that Sony is working on their Game Pass competitor. What a great selling point for that. If they're able to bring PS3 games back to the PS5, you get one monthly Sony subscription. Boom, you got your Ratchet and Clank, your Gran Turismo, your PS1, 2, 3, 4 classics.
That's really the question I have is, do you think that they will end up doing this for free? Or like one thing that a lot of people have been saying is like, I want a way to play my collection of games. I have all these games. I have a big collection of PS3 games. I cannot play them on my PS5. Do you think that they will, when they open this up, if people will be able to play that? I don't think they will. I think you're going to have to pay for it.
Well, actually, it's really interesting the way that the Microsoft side of the house handles backwards compatibility. Because if I own a Xbox 360 game and it is compatible with the Xbox One or the Xbox Series X, I put it into my console. It actually doesn't do anything besides check the license, because it actually downloads a copy of that game that's been slightly modified. Basically, all the backwards compatible titles are like 99% the same, but they have to add a little spice on them to actually make them work, right? But basically, the disc serves as the authentication to say, hey, look, I own this game. I'm going to download it. It downloads like as a patch. I don't think Sony is going to do the same thing.
I don't think there's any reason that they couldn't do the same thing.
Yeah.
But we see all these rumors of them doing like a tiered version of Game Pass. From a business side of things, I say like the only way to play these games is to use the subscription service.
Pay to play,
right. And it has to be better than PS Now. By the way,
well, of course. I mean,
PS Now is such a poor experience.
If you think about it, the reason the backwards compatibility is so strong on Xbox is because in the dark days of the Xbox One generation, that was one of the only things they had going for them. Like, that was like a major selling point, and they were trying to get all the goodwill with gamers that they possibly could. Sony's not really in that position right now. Sure, could they enable this where you can use your own discs? Absolutely. Should they? Probably, but I don't think they're in the position where they need to. And if they can charge, I mean, it's the same thing with Nintendo, right? Nintendo, how many times are they going to charge you for Nintendo Online and then the eShop and all these different ways to play
How many times
games?
have you bought a version of Super Mario Brothers? They resell without doing anything to them, by the way.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what I think that Sony's going to do. I don't think there's going to be any type of like remastering purposes. Whereas like Xbox, they went through and did the FPS boost on as many games as they could.
Auto HDR?
Yeah. I don't see Sony doing anything like that. I think they're going to put them up on this streaming service as is and call it a day. There
have been some patents that do suggest that Sony could give a little bit of juice to these older games. But even if they do, I'm not entirely convinced that this is going to be to the same level that Microsoft has spent 8 years doing, right? And it's like, it's easy to say, look, we're beating a dead horse here. We're constantly talking about Microsoft, but they have 100% led the way with backwards compatibility. Sony has not done anything. You know, I mean, they used to be great. Remember the PS2 had a full PS1 chip built inside, the PS3, the launch versions. Sony used to be like, they're basically the first company to really do backwards compatibility. You know, like you couldn't play a N64 game on your GameCube or whatever. After the PS3 generation, when they realized how much money they were losing and they gave up on backwards compatibility with the PS3 and with the PS4, they have a long road ahead to make this really worth it. And if it's part of a $10, $15, $20 a month subscription, there are some games that I would love to play again on a PS5, especially if there's any kind of advantages. But man, it's tough to see how they're going to do this in a way that's actually going to make sense as a gamer.
To me, a first-party game back in the day was Spyro, was Crash Bandicoot. These are all titles that are now owned by Microsoft.
Yeah.
It almost feels like, and I don't actually think this is necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like that Sony is kind of shedding their PS1, PS2 skin and just focusing on the era of PS3 on. Like, if you look at their identity of what are their mascots for their games, what are their big titles? God of War, Infamous was big in the Uncharted,
Last of Us.
Yeah, so like all of these things happen past PS3 on. If we do see some of this backwards compatibility, I would be shocked if the backwards compatibility was anything more than a handful of games for 1 and 2, where it's mostly focusing on the PS3 era.
It's reasonable. I mean, look, there is an enormous amount of money to be made with a subscription, PS Plus, whatever they want to call it, right? But like a Game Pass style subscription that can include PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4, and PS5 games, people will pay a lot of money for that. I feel very confident. But there's so many ways that this could go, right? You look at like Ubisoft, they have their own subscription service. I mean,
every company in the world is trying to find a way to do a subscription service. They're proving that's the only way to make sustainable money on products, because someone can buy one version of a game and play it forever, and then they made nothing on that console.
We're 100% in the gold rush right now. There's so much money floating around the gaming industry right now. There's so many acquisitions happening. I feel like we're going to look back on this early 2020 era of when things have changed in a huge way. And I think the next big step really is Sony to not only try to bring some of that backwards compatibility, but really figure out whatever their Game Pass competitor is. If they nail it, I think they're going to be in good shape. But if they get too greedy or they don't have enough or whatever the case is, I think it's going to be an uphill battle. But I'm very curious, what do you think about the PS3 backwards compatibility and what Sony's real answer to Game Pass is going to be? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to This Is for other hot takes like Sony good, Xbox bad, or I don't know, whatever the kids
10 cent buys Sony.